Okay, like we mentioned in the introduction video, our goal is to fix some of the issues that we have in this model so that we can get surface continuity and tangency between everything. Uh, this is, by definition, my definition, a great start for a first rough sketch model based off of the speed form that was drawn. So what we want to do now is we understand a potential workflow. We've roughed in the form. We kind of like where we're going with this as we look at it in 3D. We've done a quick pop it into Keyshot to just get some better lighting and analyze it. So now what we want to do is go in and fix things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the feature sets that were built because as mentioned, we were happy, or I'm happy with the curves that were built to overall define the form, but it was some of the issues were in relationship to tangency, order of the surfaces that were put in. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have to go back and fix some of the curves. So let's turn on the primary one. And one of the things is, this initial exercise that was provided was about taking this and having your splines, or figuring out how to make your splines match your concept sketch. It doesn't necessarily mean that you should be using this entire sketch, which has all your curves on it, as a individual sketch to build things off of. Many times what we want to do is just use this as a reference and rebuild the sketches. And the reason for that is if we turn it on where you have multiple curves that overlap the sketch, there's a chance that you might grab the wrong curve or the wrong edge. So let's begin, and we're going to look at this and we're going to say, okay, what should we do from the very, very start? So if we look at this sketch, one of the things that I like to do is, if I'm going to be mirroring this surface over the edge, I like to make sure, even though we can build curves, and as we look at these curves, we can say, hey, at this point we want it to be tangent, either by snapping to the guideline or making the tangency perfectly horizontal. And you can see what has been done here, which is a great start. If we zoom out here, same on the bottom. But as I mentioned, we always want to try to build off of a surface when we can. So one trick for that is we've kind of got this profile sketch already created, and you can see we kind of duplicate a few things here. But let's extrude that. We'll come up and we'll show it. And what we're going to do is take that and we're just going to extrude a surface. It's going to ask us, hey, what sketch do you want to do? We're going to just take the very first sketch because it has all the surfaces we want, and we're going to extrude it. What we're going to do is we're going to extrude it in the direction that we would mirror it on. So we're going to just kind of go this way. And I'm not worried about it this time that we've got multiple surfaces that are intersecting or things like that. We can worry about that later. So with this, one of the things that I'm going to do is I'll toss in split lines where I want our curves to meet. That way I'm snapping to the surface edge or the split line versus trying to snap to just a curve. And what that does again is it helps with us defining or having the computer understand that there's more mathematical data. So snapping to a surface provides the software with more information than just snapping to a curve, and that more information allows you to get better surfaces and also ensure that there's no little missed glitches. So now that we've built that, what we want to do is we're going to go back and we're going to get some of these curves and snap them to the surface edges. Now, keeping in mind that one of the things is that we said is that we liked the order of the surface for this one. It looks like I'm missing a curve back in here, but we'll find that here in a little bit as we just kind of scroll through them here. That's the one that's hidden. So in order to snap to the edges, I'm going to go back to this sketch here that has those drawn out, and I can still use everything. Oh, now here's what I'm seeing. I didn't pay attention. These split lines are all on different sketches. So one of the things that I recommend, and let's just go clean this up. What I recommend is we're going to roll all the way back. Let's get our, oops, let's move our surface all the way back up here because we should have done that in the beginning. There we go, because that's where we want to start working from. So what we can do is scroll all the way back up. Now we know where we want the split lines to be because we've laid in that grid. So in order to get the split lines, we're going to go into one of the top views. And we're just going to quickly redraw those edges. So we're going to snap to there. We're just going to quickly draw them in, and then I'll go back and I'll add my coincidences. Now keep in mind, if I hold my left button down, or my right button, I have this menu tree that pops up that I can build on or do quick snaps to. So if I do that, I automatically get my new line. And then if I do that again, you'll see that I simply just snap quickly. So you're not going to necessarily see me go each time to the line command. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this edge, we'll snap it to here, we're going to make it coincident, and I'm not worried that it is up here because I'm going to use it as a projection curve. So we'll do the same thing here. We'll snap through everything, and this is where building surfaces has to be extremely detailed oriented. If you don't build the surfaces and have the proper properties and coincidences and snaps and all that, what ends up happening is your curves aren't going to be right. And again, if your curves aren't right, your surfaces aren't right, and any surface that you build off of those surfaces, it kind of compounds it. So you really want to take time in this stage to build those curves right. So now you can kind of see none of these are horizontal. So what I'm going to do is just select them all, and I'll just come in, make them vertical so that we've got the straight line. So now we've got that, we can toss in our split lines. Keeping in mind, in order to do a split line, your lines have to pass all the way through the surface. So we're going to come up here, we're going to go Insert, Curve, and do a split line. It's going to ask us what our sketch is. Since I automatically have this sketch selected, it knows that that's what's going to be done because I'm in that sketch. Now, if you're outside of the sketch, then you'll have to select that sketch to do it. So let's come back, get our command up, curve, split line. It selects the sketch. We want to do project it. We're going to come down and we're going to project it onto there. And now what you can see is that we've got our surfaces broken out into a variety of areas, as well, or sections, as well as what we've got is something to snap to. Now, a couple things that are going on here is that what we can now do is, as we build this into sections, we can either build it all the way across from one curve to the other, or we can build it in patches. For this one, I think we can start here and automatically do a boundary surface all the way to here. So let us now, we'll move forward here a few steps. I want to see where we can get those curves on there. And oh, you can see here that I didn't put the split lines down here. So that's fine, because what we can do is just come back in our menu tree. And because those split lines are directly below, we're just going to select that face as well. Hit select. And now we've got the area for our curve points to snap at the top and at the bottom. So let's continue to pull up all the rest of the curves. Let me just make sure. So here again, this is the top guide curve. We don't necessarily need to use that anymore because we're going to use the surface edge. So let me just slide back one here. And what you can see is now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 splines that we're going to build off of. Now I am going to come back and I'm going to make sure if I go in to edit the spline, I now want to go in and not snap to this edge or that line. I'm going to snap to this surface edge or split line. So I'm going to just delete the relationships. And what I can then do is I will click on the line, I'll click on the edge, and then that allows me to do tangent. If this surface had a curve, I could also do curvature. You cannot get curvature off of a single 2D line because it is a 2D line. So let's just go with tangent because that was the goal for the project. We'll hit accept. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come down and do the exact same thing here. Again, the other method works, but I find that it kind of sometimes backs you into a corner. So this is, I don't necessarily do this all for if I'm doing a rough surface sketch. There are times though, as I go and create a more refined sketch, then I start doing this. So bear with me, somewhat tedious, but I just want to get it in there. You can obviously fast forward this part. So, but before you fast forward, let me just make a note. I know a lot of designers who, or surface modelers say that the approaches that I'm showing are tedious. They seem to take a long time. I don't like SolidWorks because it has too many planes. But the reality is, or let me rephrase that in order to build surfaces, it requires the use of too many planes in that. So the reality is that's what we've got. SolidWorks is a great modeling program. It does have its limitations, but for what we need to do, and to be able to hand off something to an engineer, it's a good product and you need to figure out how to work around it. One of the methods that I'm also showing you allows downstream to make your model much more editable. It helps as we go through a little bit further into the model that, and for some reason when I deleted my relations, these did not delete. It makes it easier editable and something that if an engineer needs to edit it, it's not just a free-form surface. There's some constraints to it. They can go in, it makes more sense to edit it because as we know, going in and spending hours to modify things becomes very, very cumbersome. So bear with me, I seem to be having a slight problem here with this spline. This is always one of those things too, when you're working on somebody else's model, it can cause some issues because you're not quite sure what you're doing in relationship to what's been done. So there we go. So we've got that tangent there. Let's come back down here. And now it's giving us the tangencies here. So we've got one more spline to do. We'll come in and do this one. We are going to remove our tangencies right now here because they are snapped to those lines, as I mentioned, versus snapping it to the surface edge, or the split line in this sense, which actually the split line means that we've broken this out into multiple surfaces. So really saying, you know, attaching it to the surface edge is inaccurate. Oh, let's come down here. We didn't necessarily delete that. So I'm not sure why this is giving me these problems. For some reason, it's not letting me select the edge properly. So when that happens, you know, you fall in the habit of spending too much time trying to figure out what's going on versus using your filters to select things and to make sure that you're getting the tangent edge. Now, we're going to exit out of this. When we first looked at the surface model, what had happened was we had created, or the individual had created, a three-sided surface all the way down to here. So we want to avoid that, and later on in the project, I'll show you one of the best ways to create three-sided surfaces when you're doing 3D modeling to help remove the baby's butt that we had seen. So now that we have this, we've got our surface edge, and we've got our bottom surface edge and all of our control points. What we can do is come in and create our first surface now. Keeping in mind that this is going to be our primary surface, this will be a secondary one, and then we'll build the secondary ones down here. What I'm also going to do here to make sure that I'm grabbing the surface edges, I'm going to hide that sketch that was used to create these planar surfaces. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to use my boundary. I won't get into too much detail, but when I'm doing 3D modeling, surface modeling, I don't normally ever use a lofted surface. My primary ones are to do boundaries and to do fill surfaces as a primary feature tool, and then secondary I'll use swept surfaces and revolve. I just find it gives me a more robust and better model. So what we're going to do is, it's asking for the direction. We always want to select the surface and build it in the direction that we want to sweep it in. Very much like if you're doing clay modeling or sculpting. So we're going to come in here, we'll select the next line, and the next line. Now what we want to do is we want to put on our control edge curves. So what we want to do here is, since we have multiple edges, we've got a great feature where if I right click, I can go to Selection Manager. And what that allows me to do is select multiple edges to view as one curve. So we'll select that there, we'll select that, and we'll select that. And we're going to hit Accept. Now right off the bat, it's saying what kind of tangency do we want to this. So just in case our curves aren't perfect, we're going to say tangent to face. And then what we're going to do next is come down and do the same thing for the bottom. Multiple edges, which means we want to use our Selection Manager. And again, if I selected this curve first, I want to select this edge here first, so that everything is kind of flowing in the same direction. We want to avoid confusing the software and going into multiple directions. Well, it looks like I might have grabbed the wrong thing. So again, I'm going to come back, I'm going to Selection Manager. I'm going to use my filter to make sure that I'm selecting the right edge. And the edge I may have selected may have been from this primary surface. So I'm just going to hit, make sure that I'm grabbing the right one. You can kind of see I kind of grabbed it back there. This is the one that is behind. So we'll do that. And then we've got our surfaces, our primary surface built. Now, we don't really have anything to build off of. We like this surface, it looks good. So we're going to say we're happy with it. We'll select the surface. Now, again, one of my philosophies is to build, evaluate, and refine. So I don't want to get too far down the road and discover that I haven't built this properly or that there's an issue. So quick thing is I'm going to simply come back and we're going to mirror this off. So we'll come to features, we're going to go linear pattern, mirror. I'm going to select my face plane and then my body to mirror. I want to check the continuity between the two, so I'm just going to make it knit automatically. Now let's see, we can see that we've got the tangent line versus where we didn't achieve it last time. So for me, that's my first glance, it's tangent. There are times where it may show you a tangent line, but it's still not doing what you want. So we want to just quickly go in, evaluate, measure, evaluate deviation angle. We'll select that edge, and hopefully we see all blue. Or we don't see anything because something happened where we didn't select the right, because it's still on the measure tool. So edge analysis, we've got it, let's calculate it, and that's exactly what we want to see. All the way along between these two surfaces, there's absolutely no deviation in the angle. So that's perfectly what we want. So the next thing I do, I just simply delete that mirror because I don't need to mirror it at this time. So that's our first primary surface that we've built. Now the next thing that we'll do is we'll build our secondary surfaces over on the other end. If I come in and I turn this on, we're going to build our secondary surfaces based off of the network curves that we used. So that will be part 3 of this session.